Good afternoon, beautiful people. I hope you are all doing well and feeling festive and getting your Christmas trees up and lights up if you celebrate. I still have my pumpkins at my front door and I ought to be ashamed of myself. Okay, so imagine living in a state where more than $1 billion meant to help hungry children, struggling families, and vulnerable communities just disappear. And then imagine the very government workers responsible for safeguarding those taxpayer dollars pointing the finger directly at their own governor saying he knew, he ignored us, and we were punished for trying to stop it. That's not a movie plot. That's Minnesota. And the man at the center of it is Governor Tim Walz, who needed to be removed from office yesteryear. Today, we are diving into one of the biggest government fraud scandals in recent U.S. history. It is a stunning story involving a billion-dollar welfare scheme, whistleblowers who say they were silenced, and a governor accused of turning a blind eye, and a grown political firestorm involving Minnesota's Somali community. The implications of this scandal go far beyond Minnesota and could be a window into how your tax dollars are being handled right now, even in your own state. Welcome to Nellie Miranda.
Morning, listen to this. More than 400 employees of the Minnesota Department of Human Services accusing Governor Tim Walz of failing to act on widespread fraud warnings and then retaliating against whistleblowers. That department writing on X, quote, Tim Walz is 100% responsible for massive fraud in Minnesota. We let Tim Walz know of fraud early on, hoping for a partnership in stopping fraud, but no, we got the opposite response. Tim Walz systematically retaliated against whistleblowers using monitoring, threats, repression, and did his best to discredit fraud reports. Now, the claims come as some in Minnesota's Somali community continue to face allegations, with the New York Times reporting that federal prosecutors, quote, charged dozens of people with felonies, accusing them of stealing hundreds of millions of dollars from a government program meant to keep children fed during the COVID-19 pandemic.
As always, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Now, if you haven't been following this story, let me set the stage. Minnesota's Department of Human Services employees, not Republicans, not conservative activists, but the state's own government workers, went public saying that Governor Walz is 100% responsible for what they call the largest fraud case in the state's history. They say that they warned him repeatedly. They say they showed him evidence. And instead of thanking them, listening to them, or at least investigating, they say he ignored them, attacked them, and dismantled oversight systems that could have stopped the grift. They weren't out here picking political fights. They were trying to stop corruption before everyday taxpayers paid the price.
Because there was social media, Twitter or X, claiming to be employees of the Department of Health and Human Services in Minnesota, calling out Governor Walz on allowing fraud to take place. Of course, this is a huge thing we're hearing from Chris Maddle today, Lisa Demuth, etc., which suggests that this is absolutely the #1 platform here for those running against Walz and other Democrats in the state, Corin.
Yeah, and you had the New York Times article, since you were reading it this weekend. You got that article about Minnesota's fraud there. Did not reflect well on Governor Walz. Mentioned, some of the defense attorneys involved there basically saying that the state allowed this to happen, even if they weren't, tacitly deciding that this is okay, that they had a cookie jar, they knew people were emptying it, and they just kept refilling it. We've got that, and then this account that it claims to represent 480 employees at DHS, which is about a 7,000 employee state agency, so maybe 6 or 7% of them claimed to be represented by this account, has been for 2 or 3 years tweeting nonstop about the fraud issue, and it's employees, if that's who they are. It's an anonymous account, but it's folks who are taking aim at Governor Walz and at the DFL and claiming that they are the ones behind this. The post this weekend said it was 100% Tim Walz's fault and just went into a long list of reasons why they felt that way. I will note that post got more than 36 million views by the time I looked at it this morning. It's gone now. That's our update. In the last hour or so, that account has been suspended.
Their X account has since been restored, and you can follow them here. But here's a spreadsheet that they posted back in 2024 to Kamala Harris, warning her of Tim Walz. Like, can you imagine if that duo was leading the country now? Yikes. When questioned about the alleged fraud in his state, this is what he had to say.
Dozens of people of East African descent have been charged, convicted, and sentenced for stealing more than $1 billion in taxpayer money from government programs during COVID. Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals. Those people are going to jail. We're doing everything we can.
Now, I'm not sure why the NBC host said dozens of people from Eastern African countries. No. Call it what it is. Be more specific. Almost 80 people of Somalian descent have been charged and sentenced, and Tim Walz really had the audacity to say that he's taking responsibility for putting people in jail. Tim Walz is so unserious. Sir, you should be in jail too, because it is hard for me to believe that there is no way that he did not benefit from all of this fraud. Now, here's what makes this scandal a bit more fascinating and why many people in the Minnesota government must be held accountable. This fraud didn't just happen once or over a weekend. It unfolded for years. It continuously grew and grew. And every time someone inside the government tried to raise a red flag, they say they were ignored, shut down, or worse, retaliated against. According to these employees, oversight was intentionally weakened. Auditors were cut out of the process, the watchdogs were muzzled, and while all of that was happening, a nonprofit called Feeding Our Future allegedly milked the state and federal programs for hundreds of millions of dollars. So money that was supposed to provide meals for kids during the pandemic was stolen. Housing stabilization costs grew from $2.6 million a year to over $100 million. And then damn near every kid in Minnesota was falsely diagnosed with autism. Well, I'm exaggerating just a little bit, but you get the point. One person made away with $14 million, and the Somali parents were getting kickbacks for falsely claiming their child to have autism to receive these services and treatments that were never provided. So where did all the money go? Well, prosecutors said that the money went into mansions, luxury cars, foreign trips. According to some allegations, that money may have ended up in real estate and terror groups overseas. Now, to be clear, prosecutors have not confirmed where all the money went. But when $1 billion evaporates into thin air, somebody, somewhere has to be living really nice.
Governor Tim Walz is struggling to defend reports of massive fraud that occurred under his watch, some of which reportedly went to the Somali terrorist organization al-Shabaab. The New York Times is reporting everyone, including Walz, was ignoring the warning signs because they were fearful of alienating the Somali community. And a lawyer representing one of the Somalis convicted of fraud said, quote, "It was like stealing money from the cookie jar." But instead of taking responsibility, Walz is attacking, guess who? Trump.
That is totally disconnected with demonizing an entire group of people who came here fleeing civil war and created a vibrant community that makes Minnesota and this country better. But that's Donald Trump. Deflect, demonize, come up with no solutions. He's not going to help fix anything on fraud. My God, there's a big difference between fraud and corruption is something he knows about.
So once again, President Trump is the issue, not the many people from the Somalian community defrauding American taxpayers, but Trump for rightly calling it out. As if you cannot be both a Somalian person seeking refuge and a fraudster. As if people don't start out with good intentions and then get overtaken by greed. But take a listen to what the panelists had to say about Tim deflecting and not taking accountability when asked about the fraud.
What I get so frustrated about is like this forcing us to choose sides. I mean, two things can be true at the same time. They could be fleeing a civil war, but they could also be coming here and committing fraud. They are not mutually exclusive.
Well, and Joey, part of the reason this wasn't gone after so hard is because they didn't want to offend the Somalis living in the community.
Yeah.
Which is, wow.
I got to go back to the fact, a man who would abandon his unit right before they deployed to war not only doesn't get any of my respect, but he also can't sink so low that he surprises me either. And so maybe the cowardice that was in him when he ran away from deploying to war is a part of why he couldn't tell people no. Oh, well, we're going to do $2 million, but they want $100 million. Okay, well, we'll do $100 million. I don't have much respect for this man. It makes sense that he couldn't run his state very well. My hope for those in Minnesota is that they find somebody else soon.
Yeah, well, they should be angry we got the governor here who's trying to blame Trump, and he's touting his AAA bond rating of his state to try to answer that question. And you've got a community that was committing fraud on a massive scale, and he called them a vital and vibrant part of our community. I wonder if the citizens of Minnesota agree with that they're a vibrant part of their community.
Now, to be clear, no community, no ethnicity is defined by criminals. I'm sure many Somali Americans are hardworking people who came here seeking opportunity. But here's the problem. Every time government officials avoid oversight because they are afraid of being called a racist, fraudsters saw a green light. They used that weakness against Minnesota's government. When you label accountability as discrimination, corruption will obviously win. And that is exactly what critics say happened here. Minnesota officials were so terrified of backlash that they turned their backs on taxpayers. But once again, when Governor Walz was pressed, he gave the most predictable political answer that you've ever heard of. He said, and I quote, "If you're committing fraud, you're going to jail." Wow. Like, what a bold stance, Governor. Criminals go to jail. Who knew? The question isn't what happens after fraud is exposed. The real question is, why didn't you act when your own workers told you that the fraud was happening? But to really distract from all of this, Tim Walz was like, "How dare you question me on the fraud happening in my state? Let me see your MRI, Mr. President." Watch.
Governor, let me have you weigh in on this, because part of your initial response to President Trump's post was to call for him to release the results of his MRI. And I want to give you a chance to give our viewers exactly a sense of what you mean. What exactly were you suggesting by that, Governor?
Well, here we got a guy on Thanksgiving where we spent time with our families, we ate, we played Yahtzee, we cheered for football or whatever. This guy is apparently in a room ranting about everything else. This is not normal behavior. It is not healthy. And presidents throughout time have released a couple things. They've released their tax returns, not Donald Trump, and they've released their medical records, not Donald Trump. And look, the MRI is one thing, but I think what's most concerning about this is, as your viewers out there are listening, has anyone in the history of the world ever have an MRI assigned to them and have no idea what it was for, as he says? So look, it's clear the president's fading physically. I think the mental capacity, again, ranting, crazily at midnight on Thanksgiving about everything else, there's reasons for us to be concerned.
As if the Democratic Party weren't covering up for Joe Biden's alleged dementia. That was elder abuse on full display, and everyone went along. Well, the White House has responded to Tim.
Follow up on the MRI, because President Trump yesterday said that he would release the results of his MRI. Is that happening right now?
It is happening right now. As part of, and this is a summary from the president's physician, and we will release it right now. I think my team has it teed up for all of you. I'll read it for you, and then you'll get it physically as well. We're very healthy and well perfused. Everything evaluated is functioning within normal limits with no acute or chronic concerns. In summary, this level of detailed assessment is standard for an executive physical at President Trump's age and confirms that he remains in excellent overall health.
But to circle back, what gets lost in this political circus are the real victims, the families who should have received the help, the children who should have been fed, and the taxpayers who funded a system that was supposed to help people and not enrich criminals. And now we have to ask a bigger question. Is this an isolated scandal or the tip of a national iceberg? Because there were tens of billions poured out during the pandemic. Do we really think that nobody else saw an opportunity? The bottom line is, if Governor Walz didn't know, then he's incompetent. And if he did know and ignored it, he's complicit. Either way, leadership means accountability, and Minnesota didn't get that. I'll close with this next clip, which is some remarks from President Trump regarding Tim Walz, Ilhan Omar, and the Somalian community.
Tim Walz, Mr. President, do you think he should resign over the fraud scandal in his state?
And who should?
Tim Walz, over the fraud scandal in his state.
No, I think that Walz is a grossly incompetent man. There's something wrong with him, okay? There's something wrong with him. And when you look at what he's done with Somalia, which is barely a country, they have no anything. They just run around killing each other. There's no structure. And when I see somebody like Ilhan Omar, who I don't know at all, but I always watch her for years. I've watched her complain about our Constitution, how she's being treated badly. Our Constitution, the United States of America, is a bad place. And I think she's an incompetent person. She's a real terrible person. But when I watch what is happening in Minnesota, but this beautiful place, and I see these people ripping it off, and now I'm understanding, and you're going to look at I hear they ripped off Somalians, ripped off that state for billions of dollars, billions, and they contribute nothing. The welfare is like 88%. They contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you, okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. I don't want them in our country. Their country's no good for a reason. Their country stinks. Let them go back to where they came from and fix it.
So what do you think? Should Governor Walz resign? Should whistleblowers be protected by law? And do you believe political correctness has become so powerful that it now shields for corruption? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And as always, if honest commentary brings you value, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to support the channel and ring the bell so you don't miss any updates. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.